We want to turn to two spots in our Bibles this morning as we start. So I'm going to ask you to go to the beginning of the Bible, to the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 24. Kind of hold a finger there or put a bulletin there. It goes Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, chapter 24. We're going to look at one verse there. And then I want you to flip to the end of the Bible, to the book of Revelation, chapter 18, and put something there, maybe another hand there or a bulletin there, and I want us to read both passages together. Deuteronomy chapter 24, and then Revelation chapter 18, because we're going to look at both of these words from our God today. As you're turning there, I want to read to you two very short stories, just paragraphs, just sentences. For 4.5 years, I sold my body in 15 different states and in 21 cities. It was because of the manipulation of a pimp who I believed loved me. I didn't really know love as a child, especially from a male figure. I craved what I thought was real love at any cost. So says Mrs. Espinosa, a resident of Tampa, at a recent gathering put on by the Florida Baptist Convention. He promised me everything and better: clothes, cars, a house, and himself. I was just looking for someone to love and to love me. A human trafficking survivor. Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 7. Hear with me the word of our Lord. Scripture says, if a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. Turn to the end of the Bible, Revelation 18. Look at verse 10. We read about the final judgment on this world's fallen system, represented as Babylon, that which is opposed to everything that is good and right in this world. And this is what Revelation 18:10 says. Standing at a distance for fear of her torment, saying these words, alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, in 1 hour your judgment has come. Hear this. The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn for her. No one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oils and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots. And then notice this last phrase very closely. And the bodies and the souls of men. Or as the English Standard Version puts it most accurately, and slaves, that is, human souls. The fruit that your soul longed for has gone from you. All the things which are rich and splendid have gone from you, and you shall find them no more at all. May the Lord bless the reading of His Word. I have been intrigued and captivated by the subject that we consider today for the last few years. I am sad to say I was ignorant of it until the year 2012, when the Passion Conference that is held highlighted the issue of human trafficking. And so I've entitled the message today, Human Trafficking and Freedom. In 2012, they had a film that they showed to thousands of students. And this is the way it started out. The screen was dark, and it said, slavery. When one person is controlled by another, forced to work against their will, and treated like property, men, women, and children are held captive and used for labor, for trade, and for sex. There are more than 27 million slaves in the world today, more than any other time in history. That's more people enslaved today than the entire African slave trade, just today at this minute. We thought slavery was a thing of the past. We haven't been paying attention. My friends, as Christians, we worship a God who is passionate about the oppressed and about the broken and the burdened. We are called as the people of God, as Isaiah chapter 1 verse 17 says, to do good and to seek justice and to correct oppression and to bring justice to those who are fatherless and to plead the widow's cause. We are told as the people of God in Proverbs chapter 31 to open our mouth for the mute, for the one who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute, to defend the rights of the poor and the needy. You might be shocked to know that human trafficking is the second largest criminal industry in the world. It is the fastest growing criminal industry in the world. Every minute of every day, 2 children are sold into slavery. Not adults, not people that choose this life, 2 children. You might not realize that these are children who should be playing and learning and enjoying the most precious part of their lives, and instead they are being sold as slaves. It is estimated that human trafficking around the globe generates annual profits of around $32 billion a year. Most people think that slavery in the United States ended with the Civil War, that brought an end, an abolition to human rights violations. But as you read this today, there are roughly 200,000 slaves working in America. That is according to U.S. government statistics. 17,000 to 18,000 of them will be brought in this year to the United States against their will, and the rest of the 200,000 are being trafficked throughout this country. It is the number 2 crime globally, and it is the number 2 crime in the United States of America as I speak. Right now, every day in the United States, 2,200 children are reported missing, and a large percentage of that 2,200 are brought into the human trafficking crime industry. My friends, according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, human trafficking is a $9 billion industry in the United States of America, the so-called land of the free and the home of the brave. Here's the most terrifying thing maybe of all, though really every person matters. The average age of the victims brought into the human trafficking industry in America, ages 12 to 14. The average age of the children. My friends, this is a modern-day slavery. This is a modern-day abomination, a modern-day oppression above all oppressions. There are bad oppressions, bad socioeconomic issues in America that the church needs to speak to. But my friends, none of them compare to this issue that has been under too many of our radars for far too long. Let me give you some definitions of slavery for a moment. Let me first give you the CNN Freedom Project's definition. Slavery occurs when one person completely controls another person using violence or the threat of violence to maintain that control, exploiting them economically, pays them nothing, and they cannot walk away. How about the definition of the United Nations? The recruitment, the transportation, the transfer, the harboring or receipt of persons by means of threat, use of force, or other forms, such as coercion, abduction, fraud, deception, the abuse of power or position of vulnerability, or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of having control over another person. For the purpose of exploitation. Exploitation will include, at a minimum, the exploitation of the prostitution of others, or sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery, or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or even the removal of organs from the individual, unquote. 8 out of 10 human trafficking cases worldwide involve the sex industry. The majority of human trafficking victims in the world are between the ages of 18 to 24. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services estimates there are 199,000 incidents of sexual exploitation of minors annually in the U.S., and approximately 600,000 children are believed to be at risk for sexual exploitation in the U.S. I heard Francis Chan preach a sermon on this a while back, and he said we should not call it human trafficking. We should call it little kids that are being raped right now. Because if they were our kids, that's what we'd call it. Atlanta and Houston are the major hubs of human trafficking in the United States. Atlanta in the top 14 cities for the highest incidence of child prostitution. But it doesn't stop there, friends, because Florida, our state, is the third in the nation for human trafficking. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement calls it the biggest invisible crime in Florida. Does it affect Pensacola is the next question. Well, I'm very thankful. July 19th, 2014, a woman named Andrea Walker had the bravery to write an article, and the Pensacola News Journal had the bravery to publish it, to bring it to our attentions today. That this isn't just happening on the other side of the state or in Atlanta or in Houston or in New York. It's happening in our own backyards. I've been praying about this message for years, but last month when I read this article, God made it very clear to me it is time to wake up and do something about it. Let me read you some of the article. It was entitled, "Pensacola Not Immune from Human Trafficking." Every day in the United States, 2,200 children are reported missing, and Pensacola is not immune. Many are runaways, unaware they may be running into tragedy. Many others are kidnapped for human trafficking. I have slumbered, the author says, securely in the incorrect assumption there was no human trafficking in Escambia County. Recently, my eyes were opened to the startling facts. I attended a hot topic luncheon last month sponsored by the League of Women Voters, in which two organizations, Call to Action and Call to Rescue, were speaking and represented. At that meeting, the author found out people are trafficked for two main reasons: labor and sex. The price for children or teenagers can range from $3,000 to $15,000 because the business of prostitution is lucrative and can bring in thousands per night. Young boys fetch a higher price than girls. The article says people are kept under control by forced drug addiction, intimidation, emotional coercion, often made to feel worthless to others but loved by their controller. Victims and children who have been abused at home and already suffer from low self-esteem, when they are told their family no longer wants them or loves them, they believe it. Parents of trafficked children are often addicts themselves. Homegrown trafficking, parents who traffic their own children, exists in Milton, Florida, and it's on the rise. Areas tainted by or suspected of human trafficking for labor include local restaurants, Panama City beach gift shops, and Pensacola prostitution and trafficking exists on Cervantes, as well in areas of US 29. We are told in this article that the average age of entry into the trafficking arena is 12. These traffickers know how to spot a vulnerable child. They target food courts and will subsequently lure that child in peacefully with friendliness and with a listening ear. STDs abound. Girls who live this life have a lifespan of 5 to 7 years, often ending in overdose or murder. Another sad fact is government shelters are not adequate to protect rescued girls who need extensive counseling. Without it, the adjustment is too difficult, and 80% return to prostitution, which I'm thankful to say the Florida Baptist Children's Home has become a leader in this. More on that in the days ahead in the recovery efforts. She says here, if you are shocked by this information, understand I've only touched the tip of the iceberg. It is a nasty business of violence and abuse, and it's a field hard to work in for advocates because they must deal with pictures and with details. She ends her article and says, I'm sure enough caring people in Pensacola can put an end to this abomination. Always we can change things, unquote. I thank you, Andrea Walker, for writing that article and having the bravery to say something. My friends, look at Deuteronomy chapter 24 with me, please. It says, if a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren of the children of Israel and mistreats him or sells him, then that kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. The word brethren here, if anyone is found guilty of this crime against their brethren, you need to understand it's a generic term. Any one of the people, whether it's a child or an adult, young or old, male or female, rich or poor. Jesus said, one soul is worth the value infinitely more than this entire world. You can gain everything, but if you lose one soul, this is tragic. This is speaking to everybody that lives around us, that makes this land their home. If a person is found kidnapping, the word kidnapping here literally means someone who is a person stealer. Usually done in the ancient world, not for ransom. We usually think of kidnapping as a ransom act. That is not the idea at all in Deuteronomy or in the ancient world or in the modern day. Yes, there are some kidnappings for ransom, but the majority were for enslavement, to sell someone into slavery. Just like in Genesis chapter 37, when Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery. Yes, this is an ancient crime. This is a crime that was also spoken of in the New Testament. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, we are told this: the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and the disobedient. And then it gives a list of sins, and it includes men stealers or enslavers, people who are involved in this human trafficking. In fact, when we read this idea of kidnapping, we cannot help but think of the words of Jesus. The thief comes, but to steal and to kill and to destroy. This is a satanic and an evil crime against humanity. You notice it says those who steal lives, steal persons, mistreat them. One translation says they make merchandise of them. The condition of someone who loses their liberty and their freedom, to be treated as a merchandise, as a commodity, as someone who is just being used for the profit of someone else, to have no inherent value or worth of their own, but to be an object instead of a soul that can be loved and treated with dignity. God is very much against this crime. He says if you do this, if you take one and you mistreat one, or even you sell someone else, you see this is a sin against the dignity of man, a violation of the image of God. Injustice is always taking away the God-given dignity that each individual has, and instead abusing and misusing and marring more because of the sin nature. Look, we've already lost the beauty of being alive in Christ because of the sin of Adam in the old. And this is a deliberate disfiguring and mutilation of the image of God and the likeness of God that is found in individuals. It is an injustice par excellence. In fact, it was Martin Luther King Jr. who said these words: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." And I say to you today that if we tolerate this crime and this sin, what else will be tolerated in our nation? Well, we see the effects, do we not? I heard a heartbreaking interview on the news one morning. It was an early morning panel. It was like 5 a.m. I put the news on, which I rarely do when I get up in the morning, but I did it that morning, and there was about 4 women talking about the problems of prostitution in Florida. And I heard one of the women trying to make excuses and saying we need to make safe places for prostitution. And her argument was that prostitution is the oldest vocation that's ever existed. Well, my friends, it is an old vocation, but it is also a destructive vocation. And I remind you today that God is in the business not of leaving people prostitutes and making them have safe opportunities to prostitute themselves. God is in the business of saving Rahabs and rescuing them from cities that are going to be destroyed. God is in the business of Jesus sitting at the meal with prostitutes and tax collectors and teaching them that the gospel is better and God loves them and can redeem them forever. Not just leaving them in a safer means of their sin. How do they do this? A predator gains a young person's trust, maybe online nowadays. Parents hear that. Maybe through a friend at school. The child's will and self-esteem are breaking down. They question their self-worth. Most prostituted women and girls have endured abuse at the hands of a family member or friend in the past. And so now, in fact, studies say 28 times more likely an abused child is to be arrested for sex trafficking than those who are not abused at home. She will be promised love, money, glamour. She will run away from home. And listen to this, statistically, 1/3 of teens living on the street are lured into prostitution within 48 hours of leaving home. That's a fact. 48 hours. You don't believe that? Talk to Brother Luke, talk to myself. At Nothing Lost Outreach, we've met these young women who have been lured into this lifestyle and been held in bondage in Escambia County. And we've offered them the hope of the gospel. And we've offered them help and recovery. But this bondage is satanic, and it is strong, and it is the most degrading bondage of all. Now, my friends, what happens to trafficked women is horrendous. Their innocence is traded. Sometimes they're tattooed and literally branded like cattle. They're used as property. Often they're brought into the pornography industry. Often they are simply used in places of ill repute. Trafficked women and girls are raped repeatedly, multiple times per day. 15% of all suicide attempts involve those engaged in prostitution. And 75% of all people prostituted attempt or commit suicide. Do you hear that? Remember again the ages, 12 to 14. It is not unusual that if a woman or a girl has been trafficked for only 2 to 3 years, that she has endured more than a dozen abortions at the hand of her traffickers. This takes place in public and private locations, massage parlors, spas, clubs, other fronts for prostitution. And they get them so addicted to illicit drugs and alcohol, they cannot break free from their own. If this is not mistreatment, like Deuteronomy says, what is mistreatment? Now here's the beauty of God's word. The law of Moses places a higher value on these people than it does on animals, on cattle, on property, okay? You notice what happens here. If someone is caught in the trafficking industry, the law of the Old Testament said this is such a serious crime that kidnapper should die. The death sentence, capital punishment. Now, it is not a crime in the Old Testament to steal goods, to steal cattle. Home invasion is not a crime by death. But this is a capital crime. In fact, we are told in Exodus chapter 21, verse 16, everyone who receives a stolen person should also lose their life. If you gave money to the person who stole that individual, you should lose your life. Exodus 21, 16. He that steals a man or sells him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. In other words here, this is done so you will put the evil away from your land, to deter these evil practices from destroying the community, because that's exactly what they do. Now, I want you to notice who is not spoken of here. Who is not spoken of here? The victim. The victim is not punished. The victim is not looked down upon. The victim is not castigated. The victim is not meant to feel worthless. The victim is not hurt anymore. They are supposed to be set free, not held in bondage any longer. In fact, we read in the scriptures in Luke chapter 4, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, Jesus says, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives. He has sent me to set at liberty those who are oppressed. I'm glad to say that there is a call to rescue, a call to action. I am glad to say that Liberty Church in Pensacola is doing something about human trafficking. I am glad to say that the Florida Baptist Children's Home has become a leader in this cause against human trafficking, but not just against human trafficking, against restoring the victims with dignity and love and mercy and letting them know that Jesus loves them and can help them and give them hope. So what do? Well, friends, this message is just a message of research. I'm no expert on this, and I'm going to really basically pose more questions today and give more statements and not a lot of answers, because God's going to have to lead us into this journey together. But I can give you a few things that I know we can do right now. Number one, we can pray. We can pray for the 27 million slaves in our world who are in bondage, whether in affluent countries like the United States of America or in third world countries in Asia. I want you to understand something. God, if your heart has been sickened today by the crime and the sin, how do you think God's heart feels? Does God care? Will He hear your cries and your prayers? Will He hear your praise for Pensacola? You know, every January we have a message and we pray for abortion to end in the city. Every February we have a message on racial reconciliation and we pray for God to heal this divide of the so-called races, really the different ethnicities, the people groups in our city that God loves. And my friends, we need to pray for God for this evil to stop. In Jeremiah chapter 8, the prophet says, "For the hurt of the daughter of my people, I am hurt. I am mourning. Astonishment has taken hold of me. Be broken and pray." It won't hurt. It will only help. If you don't pray about it, what can we do about it? I think of a message I actually heard this week. I was blessed to be at a leadership summit, and I heard a message by Pastor Wilfredo de Jesus, Pastor Choco, he's called, in the city of Chicago. And he was broken over the trafficking and the prostitution going on in the city of Chicago. And he told the story this week. I want to share it with you. He said, "My heart was shattered, and I had to do something. And so I told one of our staff members, I want you to go down the street and hire 5 prostitutes for an hour and pay them whatever they charge." You can imagine the staff member's face when he said this. "Pastor, really? Really? Put them in the church van and bring them back here to me." The staff member did what was asked. Before she came back, Pastor Choco and his wife Elizabeth had put a linen tablecloth on a table in one of the rooms of the church. They got delicious food. They lit candles. They arranged flowers. They brought out their best china. And when the 5 women walked in the door, they were astonished. Pastor Choco says, "I welcomed them and I invited them to have a seat at the table. And as they began to eat, Elizabeth sang a beautiful song, and we gave each one a lovely red rose. And I told them that Jesus sees each of them as a gorgeous, precious rose. These street-hardened women melted before me. They cried, they laughed, they hugged us. One looked at Elizabeth and said through tears, 'No one has ever treated us like this. Thank you so much.' And as they got back in the van, they reached into their purses and pockets to give us the money back we had paid them for the hour." Can you imagine that? He says this was the beginning of our church's ministry to prostitutes. In the years since that dinner, God has changed many lives, including mine. Our church did not have open doors to these women until God shattered our hearts with grief and then filled it with compassion and love. It will only begin if we pray. Go print that article. It's online. Print that article out. I'll send it to you. And pray every day for the victims in Pensacola. Pray for the children. I think of William Wilberforce. Slavery ended in England long before it ended in the United States of America. And when William Wilberforce and the great social reformers of England were fighting against the slave trade so hard, that great abomination, you know what they did every morning before Parliament started? They spent 3 hours of prayer, and they organized Christians throughout the country to pray. Now, don't you think they could have used that time better studying the laws and out campaigning? No. They recognized if it did not start with prayer, the slave trade would never end. And I say to you today, it's the same thing with our modern slave trade. Isaiah 58 says, "Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to let the oppressed go free? Call on the Lord, and He will answer you and say, 'Here I am.'" Number 2, we can battle pornography. It's an evil family, marriage, and soul-destroying thing. Jesus says if you look with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. But my friends, here's another reason to look at it. Pornography is part of the problem. If you're looking at pornography, you are pushing sex trafficking. There was an article in the Journal of Human Rights and Civil Society. You'll read about this in your bulletin in the back insert. It's a publication on the Protection Project at Johns Hopkins University, and the article is entitled "The Slave and the Porn Star: Sexual Trafficking and Pornography." And the authors show connections between the two. Individuals who appear in these things are slaves themselves, having been trafficked, drugged, manipulated in some way. So this fuels prostitution. So if you're looking at it, even if you're not paying for it, the article says, you're showing the advertisers and the producers involved in this business that the demand is high, which motivates them to shame and exploits even more people. Your momentary sin is contributing to the devastation of women and girls and boys around the world. I warn you against that today. Number 3, I say to you men, as the article says in the bulletin, you need to stand for something. Because slavery today mainly harms women and girls. And it's mainly men who are the abusers. So if anyone should be speaking out, it should not just be the League of Women Voters. It should be men who are just as passionate to say that this is not okay in my home. This is not okay in my city. And God's power given, I will do everything to speak against this. And I will do everything to be a part of the solution, to stand up against the exploitation and the brokenness. And then the last thing is love your children. This is why I chose this message for today. Love your children. Leviticus 19 says, do not profane your daughter by making her a prostitute, lest the land fall into prostitution and become a land full of depravity. The reason why children at 12 to 14 are abducted is because parents are not loving them. Kids feel unwanted. They feel useless. They feel worthless. They have no self-esteem because parents refuse to love them. Speak life-giving words into your children so someone else doesn't speak conniving, evil, manipulative words into them. What better way than to speak God's word into their lives? Ephesians 6:4, fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. Deuteronomy 6, you should teach them diligently to your children. When you're in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, you shall bind them on your hands and on your doorposts, speaking the words of life into your children. Smile at your children often. The simple act of kindness shows your children you love them. When was the last time you just smiled at them? Hug them lots. Because like smiling, hugging is proven to reduce stress, lower blood pressure, improve sleep, but it also helps us to connect with our kids on a deeper level. And if you hug them, the wrong people won't hug them. Love them spiritually, physically, emotionally. Psalms 103:13, as a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. Take time out of your day to do something they enjoy. We know you might not enjoy it, but they will. And so sacrifice yourself and lay your life down to show them they matter. You invest in work. You invest in the television. You invest in sports. You invest in all these things. When are you going to start investing in the greatest thing you have, your children and your grandchildren? Listen to them. It shows that you value them. You value what they have to say. It gives opportunity to hear their hearts and parent them better and shepherd them better. You can never show your children too much time of listening and love. And if you listen to them, they won't go talk to the wrong people. Listen, there's coming a day. Jesus is going to make all this right. He's going to make it right. I want you to understand something. We've got kids in our neighborhood, kids that come to this church, and I fear for them. Can I just say that? I fear for them. And I don't get why some of us don't care about them. and how we can be so self-centered to not get involved in VBS, not get involved in Aletheia, not get involved in Epic. Look, I know the primary responsibility is at the feet of their parents. I understand that, and we believe that the first youth pastor is not Pastor Kevin. It is the parents of the children. I believe that. But I'm just telling you, there's a lot of parents that aren't doing it. And you can be a part of changing children's lives if you're just willing to give an hour a week. Just an hour. It's not a lot. Do you hear me? It's not a lot. 1 hour, 60 minutes that you didn't watch a ball game, you can put something that will eternally save a child's life. There's coming a day when Jesus is going to make this right. Revelation 18 ends, and it says that great city Babylon and this world system of trafficking, it's going to end. And one day, there will be no more slaves of human souls anymore. Babylon is the world and this whole system of evil. And listen, in portraying the city's destruction in Revelation 18, God is saying that I'm going to bring down this satanic system that has corrupted the earth. And that includes human trafficking. 1 John 3:8 says, the reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil. And he so graciously chooses people like you and me to be a part of this. I'm thankful for our women. They want to go to the children's home monthly. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Thank you. What is God calling you to do? It starts with prayer. It starts with prayer. William Wilberforce, in his battles over slavery, said these words, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say that you did not know. I'm leaving you with that today. You can never again say you did not know. Jesus breaks chains. He sets people free. His love is so great for the kids of this church and this community and for women that are being held. I say today, can we be a part of God's work of freeing those who are oppressed? I say we can. Let's stand. The praise team's going to come. Let's pray. We're going to sing Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone. Let's just sing 2 verses in the refrain. And then we're going to have a special time of prayer as we close the service. Let's just sing 2 verses and then the refrain once. Father, help us now to be a part of what you're doing in this world. We love you and we praise you. I thank you that when the Son sets us free, we're free indeed. You can remove all the past, all the pain, all the hurt, all the things that have made us feel like we're not worth anything. You can remove all that, and your blood can tell us that we are of infinite value to you. So I pray that, God, for the people of this congregation that have passed, remind them they have a great future in Christ, that the past is gone. We are not to live in the past. We are to run to the future and be a part of the solution of your love and light shining. Thank you for amazing grace. In Jesus' name, amen.
Friend, this is Joshua Wallnofer, pastor of Klondike Baptist, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this sermon today. If we can be of any help to you, answer any questions about the Bible, or talk more with you about the salvation provided by the mighty hand of Christ Jesus, feel free to contact us by any of the methods mentioned on our church website. If you would like to share a testimony of how God's Word has transformed your life, please write and let us know. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall anyone pluck them out of my hand.